In the mid to late 2000s, video gaming was becoming a staple of every household. Consoles had been around long enough that most people had played games or usually owned at least one or two consoles. The generation that had grown up playing video games had also noticed their desire for entertainment had changed as well. As while they still had fun playing platformers like Super Mario or zipping in between cars in Need for Speed, they longed for something that would really pull them in. One of the cornerstones of gaming was the freedom that it offered. You're able to do things that are both possible and impossible in the real world, with no consequences to worry about. The entertainment industry was taken by storm when Grand Theft Auto 3 launched in 2001, revolutionizing the medium and showing people just what was possible when a team of talented individuals put their minds and talents together to create an open-world powerhouse of a product. There was practically no limit to what Claude, the player character, could do. Feel like running over some hookers? You could do that. Want to blow up a bus? That's also possible. Maybe you're running late to a knee-breaking appointment, so just steal a fast set of wheels and speed across town until you arrive at your arrangement. The freedom that this game offered was unparalleled. All of this commotion would inevitably rustle the feathers of Christian conservatives who were convinced that any level of violence in fictional media was unacceptable, even though their holy book tends to feature some pretty gnarly violence, but you know. One man would take the mantle as the face of the movement, defending busybody parents and their fragile opinions from the dastardly actions of cool video games. In this video, we'll be learning about a man who tried his best to dismantle a business that was generating almost incalculable amounts of money. This is the story of Jack Thompson, his unusual career in courts and politics, his battles with game development studios, and the consequences for his crusade against fun. Jack Bruce Thompson was born on the 25th of July 1951 in Cleveland, Ohio. His childhood was normal and relatively uneventful. At least, he's never publicly divulged in any interesting topics regarding his upbringing, outside of a little episode when he was a child. Allow me to fill in the gaps. The only standout story of his youth that I was able to find, other than children disliking him when he attempted to participate in team sports, was that he once poured gasoline onto the floor of his parents' garage and tossed gunpowder caps directly onto the ground, beating them into the ground with a hammer until they ignited. To say that he wasn't necessarily a bright young mind would be an understatement. He attended Denison University, a private liberal arts college nestled in Granville, Ohio, and received a Bachelor of Art degree. During this time, he hosted a political talk show on the college's own radio station, which understandably got people in a bit of a tizzy, because nobody can handle other functional human beings having differing opinions. Either way, this got some local media attention because people weren't prepared for someone to stick out their chest and share all of the wacky things that were just bouncing around in their noggin. Afterward, he attended Vanderbilt University Law School in Nashville, Tennessee, another private research institution. He earned his Juris Doctor here. He would also meet his wife, Patricia, while attending Vanderbilt. The two really hit it off, and it was your typical child-to-adult story for Jack. He went to school, he paid attention, he applied his education, and achieved the goals that he had set for himself, along with the expectations that society had for people like him. In 1976, he and his lovely wife Patricia moved to Florida to screw around in the sands and annoy migrants. He spent a year here as a fundraiser for Lagoy, your typical Christian ministry that tries to train people to spread the good word of the good Lord to impoverished nations around the world. But you definitely wouldn't find Jack doing anything like that. He had to be where the money was. Screw trying to help people understand their faith or even point them in the direction to discover it. He attended Key Biscayne Presbyterian Church, becoming a born-again Christian, which makes me wonder what the hell his ideology was prior to this. He was frequently associating with right-leaning Christian theological groups, and only then he discovered he needed a deeper relationship with Christ? Was like all of the other religious stuff prior to this not important? Either way, Jack found himself to be on a perpetual pilgrimage, a journey past the pearly gates of heaven to make his soul worthwhile to God. He had to make things right on earth, at least to the best of his ability, so that way the all-powerful creator could rest easy knowing that the happenstance of violent video games after his creation of humanity had been dealt with. Things were relatively quiet up until 1988. Jack, up to this point, spent his time praying to God and performing his duties as an attorney. This year, Thompson stuck his nose into the entertainment business, trying to dictate what people can and can't do as far as humor and expression go. He played a key role in getting the FCC to find WIOD, Wonderful Isle of Dreams, a news and talk radio station in Miami, a whopping $10,000 because the Neil Rogers show on that station made the foolish decision of trying to be funny. Turns out they aired parody songs such as Boys Just Want to Have Sex in the Morning by Uncle Bonsai, who were also known for their other knockout tracks like Penis Envy. This began an ongoing battle between Jack Thompson and Neil Rogers. While Jack was trying to find any way that he could tear apart this man's business because he felt like children were in danger, yeah, what a joke that is, Neil spent his time doing what he did best, talking on the radio. These little arguments and jabs at each other continued to go on for quite a while, with Jack recording all of Neil's broadcast after that point, calculating that he had mentioned his name 40,000 times on the radio. Neil provided the name and contact details of Mr. Thompson, encouraging his listeners to reach out to Jack and tell him that not only was Neil being facetious in hopes of trying to amuse his audience, but also that Jack was making a bigger deal out of everything than was actually necessary. I mean, Neil is right here. Jack was just trying to enact life ruination on a person who was exercising his First Amendment rights. Thompson has since claimed that, since he tried to take on a notorious radio show host, that he was receiving unwanted pizza deliveries, death threats, and visits from the local press. For a brief moment, he had some level of celebrity attached to his name, a high of sorts that he would undoubtedly try to pursue for the foreseeable future. Jack tried his best to claim that, as part of an agreement, of which I was unsuccessful at finding, mind you, that the station was supposed to pay Jack $5,000 every single time his name was mentioned, totaling $200 million to the suit. Meanwhile, Jack was bad-mouthing them left and right, trying to get their advertisers to pull funding. Remember, despite all of this, Jack was the innocent one here. He brought the fight to Neil in his legal defense, but he's the victim. Funny how that works out, huh? According to a Sun Sentinel article published on the 30th of November 1988, Jack Thompson and WNSWS-AM talk show host Mike Thompson followed around Neil Rogers and his attorney, Jerry Schreiber, yelling nasty insults and making sexual comments about them. All of this happened after a court hearing that really didn't go anywhere. But remember, this was all to prevent children from hearing inappropriate jokes on the radio. They were totally fine with yelling these obscenities in a public place, as though there was no chance that a child could ever possibly hear any of these disgusting things, you know, in a public space. Jack is always the victim. Jack's feud with Neil Rogers actually expanded into a back-and-forth dispute between Mr. Thompson and Janet Reno, who would one day be the 78th U.S. Attorney General. He met her prior to this position in November of 1975 when Jack was applying for a job as an assistant state's attorney for Miami-Dade County. He was not hired, and this stuck with him for some time. When he was involved in the persistent war of talking smack and nonsensical litigation, he attempted to run against her as prosecutor for Dade County after she had previously turned down his demands for prosecution as persecution against Neil Rogers. Thompson passed along a letter to Reno during an event, requesting that she filled out the document. This document had a few checkboxes for her, asking if she was heterosexual, homosexual, or bisexual. I guess in his mind, if you go against anything he does or says, that makes you gay. You just can't beat sound logic like that. After receiving such a nasty letter, Janet placed her arm firmly over his shoulder, telling him that she's only attracted to virile men, which is why she didn't fancy him. I mean, to be fair, there really is no reason for him to be concerned about her sexuality unless he was trying to get up in her guts. Thompson licked his wound and responded by filing battery charges against her, alleging that she had grabbed a hold of him and shook him. Assuming that she did do this, would this not have been avoided if he didn't throw baseless attacks against her character for no fucking reason? I mean, maybe there's a way he could have approached her, but what do I know? Reno was not entertained by this, requesting that Florida Governor Bob Martinez appoint a specially selected person to investigate the matter. This charge was rejected because it was clearly an attempt at intimidation on Thompson's part because he had no reason to act the way he did and he should have expected a negative reaction. He got exactly what he wanted, up until he tried to bend the system to his whim. He later confirmed that he regretted filing the charges because he reacted out of anger and annoyance, so he does have some level of humility. He does, however, still stand by asking her about her possible orientation, as once again, that is extremely important in regards to her ability to execute her job's duties.
I came up with this clever plan of handing her a questionnaire, asking her, are you heterosexual, or are you bisexual, or are you homosexual, and so forth.
She put her arm on your shoulder and said, I'm only attracted to virile men, which is why I'm not attracted to you.
Mm-hmm.
And then you filed battery charges against her.
Well, she grabbed a hold of me and shook me. She didn't hurt me, but I was annoyed. I was angry that she dealt with it in that fashion, and that was a mistake. I shouldn't have done that. I should have. But I'm glad, I think it was reasonable to ask her the question.
Reno was eventually re-elected to her position with 69% of the vote. Meanwhile, Jack continued to spread the rumor that she was gay for the foreseeable future. It's like he can't be focused on one group to be mad at, like one set of litigants he had to destroy. He wanted everybody to do what he felt was necessary and nobody could act to the contrary. In 1990, Jack continued to wage war against Janet. He had placed Switchboard of Miami into his crosshairs, a social services group that happened to have an individual on its board that rustled his jimmies, Reno. But how could he bring her down alongside this group that likely had her back? He reached into the deepest recesses of his mind, remembering his tried and true method of accusing her of being gay and spreading a left-wing homosexual agenda, purporting that this group was using homosexual education tapes to reprogram the minds of Florida's youth. These claims were entirely unfounded, and as per usual, Thompson was discredited as being a crackpot. But did you think this was the only thing that Thompson was actively trying to stick his dick into for attention? Boy, if only it were that simple. Jack has an issue with things that are fun or engaging, and even more so if they're trendy. Unfortunately for dubious types that are overly preachy by masquerading the process of gatekeeping their favorite vices as Judeo-Christian moral concern, sometimes cool things like edgy music or movies tend to involve, well, edgy things. You know, like sex and foul language, that kind of stuff. Two very important factors in the scientific field of cool shit. On February 7, 1989, hip-hop group 2 Live Crew released their third album, As Nasty As They Wanna Be, widely known for one of its hottest tracks, Me So Horny, a song that had reached #1 on the US Billboard Hot Rap Tracks chart and 26 on the US Billboard Hot 100 list in 1989, remaining on this list for 30 weeks even though airplay of the song was limited due to the nature of the song's lyrics. This album faced lots of scrutiny from concerned parents and the morally advantageous folks who wanted to use this opportunity to bolster their political career. People weren't too happy about the song talking about two consenting adults bumping uglies, especially in such a vulgar way, as they suggested this entire thing was some kind of attack on America's children. Instead of allowing a censored version of the song to hit the radio waves that could adequately soothe the burns that might have occurred during the song's initial run, this overly excitable bunch demanded that the song be permanently pulled from the airwaves and that 2 Live Crew and Luke Records be held accountable for the damages that they did to society. Yeah, that seems fair. Why not? It's kinda crazy how people are so gung-ho about holding creatives accountable for actions that they allegedly inadvertently caused, but we never see people up and motivated against the actual evils in this world. Go figure. Thompson saw this as yet another avenue for him to try to weasel his way into the minds of America's most easily swayed demographic, the out-of-the-loop busybody who thinks that the world can be fixed by looking away and demanding others fix the problem. On January 1st, 1990, he wrote to Bob Martinez and Janet Reno, yes, after all of the crap from before, and requested that they investigate whether or not the aforementioned album violated any of Florida's obscenity laws, because I guess 2 Live Crew didn't have enough problems. This is convenient for Jack because, and get this, Luther Campbell, the co-founder of Luke Records and the lead of 2 Live Crew, had released a track supporting Janet Reno when she was having her ongoing exchange with Jack Thompson however many years back. Do you think there's any possibility that this might have influenced Jack to stick his dick where it didn't belong? The state prosecutor initially declined to go forward with an investigation, but Jack greased the right palms and got local officials in the state to get in the middle of the sales of the album, effectively putting an embargo on it in some parts of Florida, alongside the album Straight Outta Compton by NWA. Jack even stated that he wanted to meet 2 Live Crew in person with or without lawyers so he could properly explain why he didn't like what they were putting out, as if not only was he the arbiter about what was right and wrong, but he was also the only person that could convince them to change their ways. This was his holy war. It's just a shame that God couldn't appoint a more proficient warrior to the task. Jack said in a Billboard interview, quote, "He would benefit from that. What I think is tragic is that much of the pain to Luther might have been avoided if we had sat down and talked. Luther has just got to understand that he has a responsibility to people, even more now than ever as a successful performer. I understand as well as anybody that the First Amendment is the cornerstone of a free society, but there is a responsibility to people who can be harmed by words and thoughts, one of which is the message from Campbell that women can be sexually abused." You heard that right. He just tried to claim that music was a driving factor in the violation of women in America. Just remember, the next time someone makes a slight against you, it's the fault of a randomly chosen but successful rap group. Jack was just starting to get his feet wet, as he had another issue with yet another track by 2 Live Crew, banned in the USA. Could it be because of the lyrics that were offensive to his tragically fragile ego and sensitive little heart? Or perhaps the imagery of the song's promotional artwork wasn't to his liking? Or maybe the song just wasn't good? Nope, it's because the song sampled Born in the USA by Bruce Springsteen. Jack actually wrote a letter to John Landau, the manager of Springsteen, over the concern of the sample's use. Thompson urged Landau to take action so as to protect the original song from, quote, "its apparent theft by a bunch of clowns who traffic toxic waste to kids, or else." That's right. Thompson wanted somebody to do something for their own intellectual property alongside threatening to take action of some form if they didn't do it. But he threatened to, quote, tell the nation about Mr. Springsteen's tacit approval, which expresses anger about the failure of the First Amendment to protect two live crew from prosecution. It's really just like Jack wanted to take the First Amendment and wipe his ass with it whenever it was suitable for him to do so. Your rights mean nothing as soon as they become a disposable resource for people that want to protect you from your own freedoms. Jack also said the following hysterically intelligent line in regards to all of this. Quote, the social commentary on the album is akin to a sociopath discharging his AK-47 into a crowded schoolyard, with the machine gun burst interrupted by Pee Wee Herman's views on politics. Am I alone in not knowing what the fuck that even means? Jack fought as hard as he could to remain relevant in a case that largely didn't concern him, writing, quote, an industry that says a line cannot be drawn will be drawn and quartered. And also, quote, I won't stop until I get the head of a record company or record chain in jail. Only then will they stop trafficking obscenity. It's good to know that he was only concerned with how people earn their money legitimately, you know, like selling albums to consenting Americans. He couldn't possibly be concerned with the truly devious things that happen behind the scenes in the entertainment industry, like the poorly kept secrets about how many prolific predators are just thriving in that business, but sure. Their song said a few bad words and they should be burned at the stake as penance. I get it. I totally agree. Jack claimed, quote, law enforcement and I put two live crew's career back into the toilet where it began, even though the litigation was only making their products even more enticing to easily impressionable children that wanted to stick it to the man by listening to contraband music. Oh, and I guess he placed their work in a very profitable and financially robust toilet, huh? Back in 1991, Jack wrote to Skip Humphrey, the Attorney General of Minnesota. This letter, of course, was about the most pertinent issue facing the state of Minnesota, the NWA album News for Life. It's a widely known fact that every single person in the state of Minnesota was personally affected by the very existence of this collection of music. Skip must have somehow been swayed by Jack's rhetoric because he told Musicland, a now-defunct company that sold records and cassette tapes, that they might be held liable if they were to distribute sexually explicit material that was harmful to minors. Wouldn't the solution be to, I don't know, only sell adult materials to adults? Pfft, what a crazy idea, right? Moving forward, in 1992, Jack was enlisted by the ever-industrious Freedom Alliance, a group of hard right-leaning folks with a desire to spread their conservative agenda. Thompson was already busting his ass to hold anybody accountable if he believed that they impeded the staunch rules of his political ideology. He was looking to take down Time Warner because they promoted the ever-popular song Cop Killer by Ice-T. He knew in his heart that the entire Time Warner Corporation was guilty of the harshest crimes, like incitement to riot and sedition. Hell, he even tried to say that it was some kind of terroristic ploy from the company because it advocated for the murdering of police officers. Time Warner caved and severed their ties with Ice-T and his associates. Thompson received the title of Censor of the Year by the ACLU, which is a title that he clearly holds very dearly. I guess in this society, suppression of spoken word is something to be proud of. If someone was going to go out and kill a police officer because they listened to a certain music track, then odds are that person was already off their rocker and would have probably harmed somebody else regardless. If it's that easy to rewire their brain and make them do heinous things, then the heinous thing was going to happen in a mere matter of time. If we're being honest, it's not so much an issue of the content that they're consuming, because most people aren't going to go out and do bad things because of a song, but rather it's an issue with the people consuming it. However, that's a much more complicated and nuanced issue than people like Jack are willing and capable of tackling. I mean, plenty of movies were released by this point that featured themes of violence and corruption, two things that Jack finds deeply troubling. There's something about these concepts being transcribed to music that just rubs Thompson the wrong way. I suppose volume knobs don't work for people like him. Jack had come to the realization that he had uncovered a surefire way to keep his name in people's mouths, fighting battles that he'd never really get too far into, but raking in notoriety and eventual billable hours in due time. Plus, making the good Lord happy was an added bonus. He sought to take action against Madonna for the music video for her song Justify My Love due to its explicit sexual nature. It is a pretty intense video if adult media makes you squeamish, but you can look away or close your eyes and suddenly the scary scent of intimacy is gone. Jack is right to assume that most parents are likely ineffective at shielding their children from harmful things. Maybe his heart is in the right place because he wants to protect their innocence, but at the same time, it's not hard to see that this is a foolish pattern. The job of administering censorship on that level is at the discretion of parents, and they should be the buffer between their child and negative outside influences. Parenting isn't something that should be treated as a passing chore, and it also shouldn't be invaded by a governing body because some people are bad parents. After telling Madonna that she wasn't allowed to profit from her own artistic endeavors, Jack tried to save the poor ladies in 1996 by contacting Viacom in hopes of gutting MTV because, and get this, MTV was broadcasting something he coined corporate pollution. All that really meant was that MTV happened to feature music videos that were, as you can guess, offensive and obscene. The goal of these music videos was to give a unique identity to the product, and also of course to further the spread of the song. If a video is controversial, this leads to buzz, and if something gets more people talking, that means eventually more money will be made. Folks like Jack who riot in and try to stir the shit pot only really serve to make these supposedly morally bankrupt types even more money. This is the outcome they want. Even then, music videos are an art form. Music in and of itself is art. Human expression is a wildly varied thing and can't really be contained to a basic spectrum. While some things need to be withheld by a threshold of censorship like preventing minors from accessing adult stuff, this does not mean that harmless, mature concepts or ideas should be outright banned. It's all about healthy and mutually agreed upon moderation, but Jack can't possibly conceive that idea. He even tried to suffocate the company by writing to the direct advertisers of MTV, urging them to reduce or completely drop their funding because of the supposed negative implications that a TV channel had on society. He even wanted the US Army to stop airing recruitment commercials on the channel because of the supposed sexual harassment scandals. If somebody sees a military recruitment advertisement and is inspired to pursue that career path, why do we care if it's on a station that isn't meant for young children? Sure, you could argue about the whole military-industrial complex thing, but this was targeted towards the age range that makes sense. But if it makes sense, that also means that Jack has to be opposed to it. It'd be one thing if the ads were appearing on some educational children's programming block, but I also doubt that people were putting on music television so their kids could watch Sesame Street. In case you haven't figured it out by this point, Jack Thompson is a self-righteous, moral grandstanding asshole who believed that it was his duty to prevent tax-paying Americans from spending their hard-earned money on harmless fictional media. You're not allowed to enjoy music that covers violent or uncomfortable topics, and you damn sure can't see anything sexy on TV. Your life is supposed to exist with only varying shades of gray, and you have to give all of your money to the government so they can tell you what else you're not allowed to have. This thought process was only emboldened when he discovered another type of media where artistic expression was really starting to blossom, an industry that allowed participants to dive into living and breathing worlds with their own rule sets and messages. Jack had decided to tackle the ever-expanding business of video games. Video games were an incredibly unique turning point for entertainment because for the first time, people were allowed to actually do things within a product. It was the result of the natural progression of media expansion. Books can tell you things, sounds let you hear things, images and videos can show you things. Video games, however, managed to merge all of these concepts into one unified idea, a medium that lets you go and do things. While yes, this platform could be used to teach you how to perform tasks via process simulation, and that's actually a pretty popular game genre these days, but this was more of an opportunity for studios to create expansive and enthralling fictional worlds where players could get lost in. People can now go on multi-part journeys to places they never would have thought of on their own, completing exhilarating tasks, making the player feel as though they've accomplished some kind of epic quest. For every family-friendly idea that you could apply to this, there were plenty more mature concepts that were also applicable. Violence and sex were things that could be further explored in this medium. I mean, think about how awesome it was in the 80s and 90s when people were turning on the TV or going to the cinema to watch action flicks where some stoic hero kicks alien ass and blows things up for 90 minutes. Now imagine how novel of a concept it was to try to capture that feeling in a video game, making the player feel as though they were the action hero in a movie story. That opportunity alone caught the attention of many talented parties in the business who had aspirations of making the most exciting and successful video games that they could. But let's hit the brakes and talk about tragedy for a moment. The Columbine High School massacre occurred on April 20th, 1999, shocking the nation, leaving its one true hero in a state of shock and disbelief. Jack had been a stay-at-home father for a little while now, taking care of his son and looking for a way to get back to what he did best, assisting the government in overstepping boundaries that were put in place for valid reasons. Seeing this tragedy and the decay that surrounded it, Jack knew that the root cause of this event wasn't unchecked mental illness or parents not looking in their child's bedroom, but rather video games. Jack had noticed a growing trend in America's youth that happened to be engaging in electronic entertainment. In March 1998, Michael Carneal opened fire on his fellow classmates during a prayer session in Paducah, Kentucky. Carneal's free time up to this point was spent playing popular violent video games such as Mortal Kombat and Doom, both renowned for their addictive gameplay and photorealistic gore, for the time anyway. Thompson had worked with the attorney of a handful of victims to help file a $130 million lawsuit against the studios and companies that had put out the product. Jack Thompson wanted to hit the entertainment business where it hurt, and using something as easily controllable as video games, especially considering they were still a relatively new addition to the home appliance market, made it easier for Jack to spread his message about moral superiority. Columbine happening after the fact that Jack had already made his voice known in opposition of virtual products only helped to grow his career. He has claimed that within a short amount of time of the shooting happening, he had already made contact with the local police department, spinning the tale that gamers were behind this latest transgression against innocent people. Turns out that the two maniacs who decided to take out their frustrations on their school were also relatively normal teenagers outside of all their wacky shit, and they of course played video games, particularly Doom. Doom was everywhere at this point, being ported to numerous consoles and platforms, not to mention featuring tools for players to create their own user-generated content, and its extremely popular online multiplayer meant that Doom was an entirely new beast compared to other games. The ugly stigma about gaming was reaffirmed when the news broke that two idiots with access to guns also happened to have the relatively harmless and shared general hobby of gaming. Game studios and their publishing companies were not only having to try to convince people to purchase their product to have fun, but to change the public's perception about gaming and the various stereotypes that had been attributed to people who were just looking to unwind. Meanwhile, while Jack was up late worried about what children might do if they blast away a few pinkies with a super shotgun, another game studio was hard at work on the second entry to the recent breakout hit, a top-down game where you, the player, could climb the ranks of the criminal underworld and evade police while pulling off increasingly audacious stunts of criminality. A Scotland-based studio known as DMA Design was carefully crafting what would eventually become one of the biggest entertainment franchises of all time, Grand Theft Auto. The Grand Theft Auto franchise changed the way people saw gaming. Previously, the concept of an open-world sandbox was kind of taboo. We had seen games attempt some level of open-world gameplay before, usually through hub worlds like Peach's Castle and Super Mario 64, but GTA 1 and 2 were able to push the boundaries of what people thought was possible despite the graphical and technical limitations of the first two entries. While the visuals might have been a touch dated and rough around the edges, the freedom the games offered was unparalleled. There was technically no right or wrong way to play the game, and this was a pretty big deal. The series was only going to turn more heads as development for the third trip around the sun began, as DMA Design, later becoming Rockstar North, was looking to transform their 2D top-down crime sandbox into a fully fledged 3D modeled living and breathing world, something that seemed impossible at the time, and in a way, it kinda still is. If gamers couldn't get enough of running down Hare Krishnas in the first few games, they wouldn't be ready for the technological leap they'd find waiting for them in Liberty City. GTA 3 changed the gaming industry in ways that are still being felt to this very day. If not for the groundwork that GTA 3 had laid out, who knows what the state of gaming would be today? The game's main character, Claude, could be controlled with complete freedom of choice. He could steal cars, kill random civilians, participate in heinous crimes, and even blow the limbs off of cops if they happen to get in his way. All of this high-class entertainment was being brought to life by the Sony PlayStation 2. It wasn't an uncommon thing for video games to brand themselves as edgy or controversial, reveling in their notoriety because negative attention is arguably better than no attention at all. However, Grand Theft Auto was unique with this, as it had this fuck-it-all attitude where you weren't told what to do outside of linear missions. Rockstar gave players a series of structured things to do in an unstructured environment, bringing an entirely different dimension to the medium. The game was an immediate hit with adults and children alike, despite the age requirement for the game clearly indicating that the product was meant for mature audiences. People like Jack were terrified of what a game like this could potentially cause, because if killing virtual demons was enough to drive someone to turn a gun on their friends, who's to say that racing stolen cars in GTA 3 wasn't going to mean a similar fate was coming for easily impressionable gamers? Thompson's frivolous lawsuits weren't really going anywhere at this time, as judges were unmoved by Jack's attempts to connect unrelated violence to the passive hobby of playing video games. His questionable leaps in logic should have made him question why more kids weren't stealing cars and murdering gang members if the games industry was rapidly growing. I mean, Jack was seriously trying to run a $5 billion lawsuit for the families of the victims of the Columbine shooters, mind you, against Nintendo of America, Sony Computer Entertainment, Sega of America, AOL Time Warner, and id Software. It was only a matter of time before Thompson would learn about the ever-popular crime thriller that was taking the world by storm. It all started with a mute and a bomb builder narrowly escaping a prison convoy. Jack had no idea the type of competition he'd have. He was repulsed with the themes of Grand Theft Auto, the sex, violence, drugs, all of it was downright despicable in his eyes. Nobody should be able to freely enjoy a product or service they pay for if it means that Jack is going to feel a little unsafe and unhappy. He had seen all of the coolest parts that both GTA 3 and its direct blockbuster sequel GTA Vice City had to offer, and he couldn't let anybody have access to their sexy contents. I mean, think of the children, damn it. Jack approached his son, Johnny, asking him to help him in his crusade against all things fun. Jack was under the impression that major retailers like Best Buy were peddling the games to children. He thought that if he sent his son inside of a store to purchase the game, he could prove that these corporations don't care as much about the issue as they try to say, meaning that he and other people need to put limitations on what media people are able to consume. He sent little Johnny into Best Buy with $60, tasking him to acquire the illicit contraband. All Johnny had to do was follow the yellow line to the destination, pick up the copy of Vice City which was marked with a green blip, and get away with purchasing the item without getting caught by the VCPD. Johnny successfully bought the game while Jack recorded from the entrance, catching the entire transaction on film, knowing damn well that he could use this as evidence in his jihad against everything that people love. It was only a matter of time before some ignorant asshole would have to go and make things even harder for people that just wanted to play video games. It was 8 p.m., June 25, 2003. Newport, Tennessee was just checking in for the evening, and the roads were about as busy as usual. Today, however, was extremely different from what people in the area were used to. A motorist couple had died on the road in an unusually gruesome way. Instead of succumbing to a car accident, innocent lives were taken with the use of a rifle, operated by a mentally unwell 15-year-old named William Buckner, accompanied by his 13-year-old stepbrother Josh. These two boys both came from dysfunctional homes and quickly bonded over their shared drama. They also found one other way to connect prior to their criminal escapade. The two spent a good amount of time playing Grand Theft Auto 3, and having spent a disproportionate amount of time committing felonious acts in that game, Will sought to use it as an explanation for his behavior. It couldn't possibly be that he's got some screws loose and can't accurately ascertain as to what is morally right and wrong. No, it just had to be a video game. Will and Josh decided after an evening of aimlessly playing GTA 3 that they could do some of the game's actions in real life, like shooting at trailer rigs with a .22 caliber rifle. They lied to their parents, saying that they were just leaving the house to ride four-wheelers, not revealing the actual thing that they were going to do in just a short amount of time. When their bullets finally hurt people, they tried to suggest that they were out shooting pigeons and one or two of them happened to fly in the way of traffic, which led to their bullets passing through innocent bystanders. Surprise, surprise, the ignorant kids that had no regard for the safety and well-being of other people tried to shift the blame onto an unrelated product, which of course would bring unnecessary drama to the lives of those who were involved in the creation of such games. Will adamantly declared that GTA 3 had influenced his mind in some way, and this, of course, eventually hit the news. Jack caught wind of this unfortunate set of circumstances and swiftly took action, ready to bring the fight to the people who were poisoning this country with fiction. This was all happening during a surge of delinquents blaming their flirtatious relationship with crime on a video game that told a simple story and let them freely roam the environment. Because, you know, the game was more or less only violent when you were. Mostly. There were so many reports coming from San Francisco and Oakland of teens using GTA 3 and Vice City as training grounds for committing crimes like theft and murder. But how could that ever be proven? Another slack-jawed degenerate lunatic known as Dustin Lynch, another unwell 15-year-old, had stabbed and beaten a girl to death soon after the release of Vice City, much to the chagrin of Thompson, who urged the father of the girl to press charges against Rockstar. These lawsuits always petered out and never really went anywhere substantial, but Jack saw a good strategy that he could employ and abuse here. Even if he didn't win the cases and make the world immediately safer by lining his pockets, he was still getting the attention of the American people, and that's enough to send a message. As long as blood was to spill, Jack had a means to keep his name in the limelight. Boy, the riches! Oh, and I guess he also had the chance to protect children from violent video games. I almost forgot about that one. October 20th, 2003 was a big day for Jack, as he filed a massive lawsuit on behalf of the victims of Buckner's actions. The suit demanded a whopping $246 million from Sony for marketing GTA 3, Walmart for selling the game, and Rockstar Games for being the mastermind behind this grotesque and evil smut. Jack was adamant that Rockstar and Sony were intentionally marketing the games to children, despite the fact that they branded the games with the ESRB mature rating as required by law. Jack said, quote, "If they're going to continue to market adult-rated games to children with these horrific consequences, then we're going to take their blood money from them and send a message to their boards that they have to stop this practice or there will be other suits on behalf of other people killed by these games." Let's be real for a second. This is a totally bogus argument from him. And if somebody who's experienced emotional pain from losing a family member can be swayed with some hush money, tells me that they might not actually have given that much of a shit about the person they lost. You know what I mean? It just sounds kinda, I don't know, fake. I don't know about you guys, but I don't think I'd be too keen on exchanging any amount of money for the life of a family member. The disconnect here is downright disgusting. Jack already thought that GTA was raunchy enough with its drugs and virtual hookers, but little did he know how much worse it could actually get. Rockstar was already a household name for their controversial decisions in regards to their Grand Theft Auto franchise, and they had no intention of slowing down production anytime soon. They had gotten a better handle on working with the renderware game engine, and they wanted to try their hand at different themes and genres for games. While the world was still eagerly awaiting the next iteration of what would come to GTA, Rockstar had been working on a horror stealth title that pits the player against an army of reprehensible and deranged gang members, trapped in a snuff film ring that has a stronghold on a near-dystopian interpretation of America's decline. This game was Manhunt. While GTA was known for its fast gameplay and back-to-back balls-to-the-wall action, Manhunt chose to take a few steps back from the chaos and focused more on the experience of being hunted down like prey. This game relied on the thrills that we usually get from watching horror flicks, and once again Rockstar wanted to dive deep in what a game can actually offer as far as triggering emotions and responses from players. They carefully crafted one of the best additions to the third-person stealth genre. Rockstar is almost always trying to sell some kind of commentary to you, and this time around it was all about the gore. The violence featured in Manhunt was even more obscene than what was available in GTA. Sure, Grand Theft Auto 3 let you blow heads and limbs off of NPCs depending on the regional status of your copy, but Manhunt took things a step further. Not only can you pop someone's head, which was also significantly more violent this time around, mind you, but you can sneak up behind your enemies and brutalize them with a slew of weapons. The executions bring the camera close to the action. The player character, escaped convict James Earl Cash, is an incredibly capable killing machine who is fighting for his survival in what appears to be a wildly intricate snuff ring that likely gives commentary on some of the more powerful people in the entertainment industry, but that's a story for another day. Manhunt was incredibly important for Rockstar's reputation, as not only were they receiving the ire from upset parents, but because they had created another product that seemed to be intentionally designed to stir up drama. Jack made sure to point his fingers at Rockstar's first attempt at horror whenever brutal murders came up. If it involved guns, it was GTA's fault. If it was something more intimate like a stabbing, it was because of Manhunt. Even though Manhunt featured shootouts like GTA, but with an even more shocking and grounded approach to the violence. You weren't being pursued by cartoony criminals or hungry zombies or bloodthirsty demons, but instead gritty and terrifying depictions of violent maniacs. A mishmash of slasher movie motifs, mixed with a healthy dose of the warriors to give each gang their own unique identity. This game was just begging for Jack to come and cause some problems, and while there's no denying that Jack Thompson hated everything that Rockstar was putting out, he stayed far more focused on Grand Theft Auto because that's where the real money is. Even though Manhunt was a massive success in its own right, no child was killing his classmates and claiming that Manhunt told him to suffocate his friends with plastic bags. It didn't have the same reach that GTA did, and Jack just didn't find that as appealing. He hated it, he'd reference it, but he never really got much further than that. The game did get banned in some countries, but Jack didn't see fit on bringing that type of notion to the United States. Thank God. Now, while the world was freaking out over video games and inappropriate TV shows, there was another figure in the entertainment industry that was pretty good at getting under the skin of concerned parents. Howard Stern was still a big deal at this point, shocking people left and right with his obnoxiously offensive but innovative radio and TV show. Jack Thompson was, if you can really believe this, not a fan of the things that Stern was talking about. Jack filed a complaint with the FCC regarding Stern's show because of how often Howard and his co-host used bad words. It's really not like people listening to the Stern show could catch someone saying fuck or cunt loudly into the microphone, considering everything was played at a delay for censoring, and Stern even told his participants to not use coarse language like that because of all of the rules of terrestrial radio. Jack was, as per usual, lying through his teeth by tugging at heartstrings. Jack claimed that he was targeted by Stern and his listeners, receiving many harsh phone calls from people that were not happy with Jack for not only being a snitch, but also being stunningly full of crap. Of course, Jack is the victim in all of this, even though he cost a man precious airtime in Miami and even got him fined $500,000. Stern just took it as it happened, fighting all the way, still paying his dues that were demanded of him. Howard congratulated Jack by referring to him as, quote, the lunatic lawyer in Miami who got me off the air down there. As always with Jack, I'm left wondering what the hell was the point of all this nonsense. If Stern's radio show or his TV broadcasts were too much for him or his family, there was nothing stopping him from changing the station. Or, I don't know, closing his eyes or covering his ears. A lot of this stuff just comes down to understanding that you, a functional adult, have control over the tiny little details in your life, such as what you're listening to on the radio or what you're watching on TV. It's not like he was being restrained and forced to watch things that are actually kind of interesting. If he was actually getting that kind of treatment, I'd have to wonder what the fuck was wrong with the state of Florida. Jack may want you to think that he was crusading to save American children from the dastardly deeds of the Scottish forces, but his business model relied on the success of the GTA franchise. If people didn't get hurt of the alleged actions of an inanimate object like a video game, and others couldn't be convinced that game development studios somehow caused that to happen, then Jack wouldn't be getting his paychecks. In 2005, he involved himself in yet another tragedy that was perpetuated by a nutcase. This case involved a whack job named Devin Moore. Devin's actions, however, occurred some years prior to the lawsuit, on June 7, 2003. Devin was a young adult at the time he decided to turn a gun toward other people, and his free time was often spent playing Grand Theft Auto. On one fateful night, at 3 in the morning, police officer Arnold Strickland discovered an 18-year-old sleeping in a vehicle that was reported stolen. Strickland arrested Devin and brought him back to the station to figure out what the hell was going on and why he stole that vehicle. During the booking process, Devin grabbed the officer's gun, pointed it at Arnold, and killed him. Devin got out of there and another cop chased after him. However, Devin managed to turn around and fired off a few rounds at him, netting Devin yet another kill. He also murdered yet another person in an emergency dispatch office. To escape, he stole a police car and sped off. He was apprehended and taken in just past the Mississippi state line. During a court hearing that occurred in December 2004, Devin said, quote, "Life is like a video game. You've got to die sometime." And people took this foreboding message to heart. Because crazy people are totally rational, right? They can be trusted as reliable narrators. When Jack stuck his nose where it didn't belong, he always found a way to fan the flames in the worst possible way. He tried to say that Devin was methodically trained to do what he did because Grand Theft Auto allows you to do crazy, mostly impossible crimes. Like it's a game where you're only tasked with killing innocent people and law enforcement. He was still doing this crap years after he had involved his son in trying to take down a gaming franchise meant for adults. His son was in middle school around this time and every kid knew who his father was. And I'm sure you know this by this point, but children can be quite unkind. Johnny asked his father to not continue his crusade against gaming because other kids were giving him a hard time. Jack, of course, decided to ignore his son's social life and spread his message of misinformation.
They were gunned down by 18-year-old Devin Moore, who had played Grand Theft Auto day and night for months. Attorney Jack Thompson, a longtime crusader against video game violence, is bringing the suit.
Are you saying that Devin Moore shot 3 people in the head because of a video game?
What we're saying is that Devin Moore was, in effect, trained to do what he did. He was given a murder simulator. He bought it as a minor. He played it hundreds of hours, which is primarily a cop-killing game. It's our theory, which we think we can prove to a jury in Alabama, that but for the video game training, he would not have done what he did. The video game industry gave him a cranial menu that popped up in the blink of an eye in that police station, and that menu offered him the split-second decision to kill the officers, shoot them in the head, flee in a police car, just as the game itself trained him to do.
Thompson's involvement in the case didn't go too incredibly far because he was immediately hit with a dispute over his temporary admission to practice in Alabama. It's not common for an attorney to practice law in a state that they don't have a jurisdiction in, but it does happen. The judge also alleged that Thompson violated his gag order during the criminal trial, which eventually led to Thompson trying to remove himself from the case, but it was denied. The judge instead revoked Jack's temporary admission to the state's bar as a way of humiliating him. This made Jack cry and complain that the judge was protecting Devin from any kind of prosecution, and that his ethics were questionable at best. Despite his claims, Devin was convicted on 3 counts of capital murder on October 9, 2005, and was sentenced to death row by lethal injection. Unsurprisingly, he's still alive to this day. Gotta love the criminal justice system. Despite everything going on, Rockstar was still celebrating the tremendous success of their titles up to this point. The company was only growing in popularity and size, and their projects were shaping up to be some of the most influential and groundbreaking in the industry. There was no hotter studio than Rockstar, and every investor, reporter, politician, and gamer wanted to get a piece of the action, for better and for worse. GTA was already accused of polluting the minds of children because it featured a fully functional prostitute solicitation mechanic. Players can pull their vehicles up to ladies of the night, honk the horn of their vehicle, and the hooker will climb inside, so long as it's roomy enough. The player then has to take their date to a secluded area so they can get their weasel greased. Oh, and get their health restored, the important part. Starting with Vice City, players could visit and even purchase a strip club, complete with on-stage dancers and private performances for anybody who thought they could squeeze some juice out while looking at some low-poly knockers. Sam Houser, one of the masterminds behind Rockstar, wanted to create an even more robust experience for gamers, something truly cultivated for a mature audience. He knew that violence was already hard enough to push the envelope on, but he could get away with a lot at this point. Sex, however, was much more taboo and required a little bit of finesse. San Andreas was going to be the biggest entry to the GTA series yet, jam-packed with loads of vehicles and weapons, a compelling, lengthy storyline with tons of side activities to keep you busy until you're wasted. One of the many new systems introduced in this title was dating. Carl Johnson, the main character of San Andreas, was able to meet women and pursue romantic relationships with them. This included taking them out for food or bonding at the many chains in the satirized version of the West Coast, but Houser knew that he could bring it in even further, making it that much deeper. There was a push for a fully developed series of minigames that allowed the player to engage in sexual intercourse, including doing the nasty in multiple positions, oral copulation, the use of adult toys, and spanking. Can't forget that. One character even engaged in habitual pole polishing, and that guy actually made the cut, which is pretty surprising. There was no way that this content was going to fly with the ESRB, but a majority of this stuff was already created and working in-game. Rockstar and its parent company Take-Two already knew that the controversy would be a double-edged sword. While they were able to continuously make their name known for challenging what was acceptable in media, they also ran the risk of having regulation placed against them for their supposed transgressions against decency. By the time the game had gone gold and was shipped to retailers around the world, the contents of the Now Cut feature were disabled and left hidden away in the game's disk. The launch of San Andreas was a tremendous success, to nobody's shock, and people like Jack Thompson were working tirelessly to push the same tired narrative that he had been perpetuating for years. Nothing was going to change. At least, that's what gamers thought for the longest time. Unfortunately for them, some gamers are a little more intuitive and curious than some folk. Patrick Wildenborg, a resident of the Netherlands, is a man who has spent many of his days doing computer consulting, making deals with big corporations and military applicants. His hobby, however, was playing GTA Vice City. He had burned his way through Vice City, making the town his bitch and taking over the entirety of Florida's, or rather Leonida's, drug empire. Upon completing the game, Patrick found himself wanting more. The expansive story of betrayal and revenge that he had experienced wasn't enough, and replaying GTA 3 wasn't going to solve his desire for more content either. Because of this, Patrick started tinkering with the game's code, making his own modifications to enrich his own experience. Gamers were already actively creating mods for the PC version of GTA 3, and due to the close similarities between 3 and Vice City, it didn't take long for people to move their efforts over to the newer title so as to take advantage of all that fancy new technology that was sitting there under the hood waiting to be abused. Modding GTA games was becoming increasingly popular, and Rockstar even used the notoriety of fan projects to further the spread of their games on PC, making mods a selling point despite the fact that mods tend to break their end-user license agreement. Once San Andreas arrived in October of 2004, Patrick was immersed in the deep experience the game offered, but he couldn't wait to get a peek inside the game's engine and see what Rockstar had been working on the last few years. Since the game was currently only available on the PS2, there wasn't much that Patrick or others could do as far as modding went, but it did give them a lot of time to research the game's formats and how certain parts of the game engine worked. Meanwhile, Sam Hauser was focused on trying to get the cut content in a working condition for players to enjoy as soon as possible. He had been cooking up an idea to try to bring back the adult content on the PC version via a post-release optional patch. On November 25, 2004, Sam emailed Leslie Benzies, the president of Rockstar North, asking if he could, quote, explore any additional content ideas to see how hard we can push the sex stuff to make it bonkers. Benzies assured Hauser that they would work to get the sex content back to the way it was. Initially, these ideas started off as releasing a standard M-rated version of San Andreas on PC, and also putting out an adults-only variant that would be sold as more of an artistic statement than some kind of business venture. They wanted to stick it to the people in charge and show them that they were willing to go places that nobody else would. Patrick and another notable codecracker, Barden Waterduck, were working hard to decipher the oddities they had found within the files of San Andreas. They had discovered unusual functions and string names, and IFP files with bizarre titles. IFPs in the classic 3D GTA games are animation containers. They can hold multiple animations with unique names and timescales. These IFP files were uniquely named, quote, kissing, S&M, sex, and of course blowjobs with a Z. It's not uncommon to find cut content within the files of a finished title, as it's oftentimes easier to just disable the unfinished functionality rather than just cutting it entirely. However, finding entire pornographic mechanics within a game is not as common comparatively. All of these assets and scripts weren't supposed to be seen by the public eye, and modders kept their heads down and waited to see what would happen. Deductive reasoning would indicate that they would cut these files from the PC version because they'd have to go through all of the game's assets when porting over the content. Most formats don't tend to work across platforms, so they'd undoubtedly see these things they left behind and trim the fat, right? Jack Thompson was still preoccupied with trying to sell the same tall tales that he had been dealing for years. Nothing had changed for him, not yet anyway, and he was waiting for something to finally fall into his lap. San Andreas was already a shocking product, and while he may or may not have been aware that it was going to be released again on PC, he had no clue how important the forthcoming port would be for his career. San Andreas released on PC on June 7, 2005, and to everyone's surprise, all of the same assets regarding the sex minigame were there. And just a few days later, a working build of the minigame was in the hands of the talented modders. The dating missions now had the girl invite CJ into her place for coffee, and then the highly mysterious activity was there for the players to, partake in. Patrick dubbed the mod hot coffee, named after the beverage that CJ's lady friend lured him into the bedroom with. Rockstar caught wind of this fast because how could they not? The game was a hot commodity on PC and people were diving into this expansive virtual world on a new platform that was already booming with mods for the previous games. Even though Rockstar was intending to look for a way to deploy this content on their own time, modders were able to get this functionality working before Rockstar could have done so. The ESRB was not happy about these discoveries, because they were not informed about this portion of the game when they were sent a demonstration of the game's most offensive parts. The ESRB rates games based on input from people who watch a selection of footage of video games, detailing the most shocking or gratuitous parts in order to accurately rate the game based on its obscenity. Even though the hot coffee minigame wasn't accessible via normal means, the minigame itself was still functional and left within the files and could be turned on by anybody with a good amount of technical know-how. That was even worse when compounded with the fact that these people could make patches so a broader audience could see the content. When Rockstar was designing the minigame, they used models of the girlfriends that were wearing underwear. However, there were also even more unused naked variants of the girlfriends that were adopted by the modders instead of using the censored versions, which supposedly made things look even worse than they actually were. Allegedly, anyway. Keep in mind, this could have been avoided if they just removed the models or replaced them with the censored variants or something. The naked models didn't even have to be there, let alone the entire minigame. Their public relations department denied any evidence against them that suggested that they had left the files in the game locked away, instead of proclaiming that everything was made by modders from top to bottom. Patrick had started to receive a lot of attention in his hometown, with local news outlets trying to get his attention and even receiving phone calls from the New York Times, CNN, ABC, Fox, you name it. People wanted to get to the bottom of this. All the while, Rockstar was lying about how the minigame even came into fruition. Gamers knew that something this big and this controversial would definitely lead to something worse for the company and the series as well. Just wait until Jack Thompson catches wind of this. This type of controversy was the last thing that anybody at Rockstar could have wanted, not to mention the type of ammunition it gave their detractors. Someone like Jack Thompson, for example, is actually the last person you would ever want to learn about the disaster. And trust me, he did. Oh God, did he hear about this. He had been trying to tell the world about the dangers of Rockstar Games for years, how the gaming industry was built on creating and selling smut to children, how we should all just give up our guilty pleasures and sit around and just read the damn Bible. The hot coffee situation was the smoking gun for his argument, a means to justify his insane rhetoric that he had been deploying for years. The world had allowed things to fall into place so as to make Jack look a little less insane than usual. If nothing else, society would assume that a broken clock can be right twice a day. Thompson worked with David Walsh, a key figure of the National Institute of Media and Family. Walsh, however, didn't exactly agree with Jack's assessments. Jack reiterated this point time and time again that not only is Rockstar evil because of the violence they feature in their games, but they had knowingly put pornographic materials in their products, and this meant that it was distribution of sexual material to minors, even though their contents could never be accessed by normal means, and the game was not meant for children. Walsh did agree to issue a national parenting warning about San Andreas. Again, none of this content could ever be accessed by normal means. No gameplay tricks, no cheat codes, no exploits. All of this content could only ever be seen on PC using specific patches made by adults for other adults. It was a very tricky situation. Jack was working hard to spread the word about this story that he didn't entirely have a firm grasp of, and while he was busting his hump lying to the American people, he received a phone call from the office of Senator Hillary Clinton. Hillary, still licking her wounds after her husband got his meat licked in the Oval Office, wanted to assert her power over a development studio that dared make mature content for adults. It's also worth mentioning that, during this period, Jack tried to claim that GTA Vice City also featured a similar sex minigame locked away within the game's code, but that is complete bullshit. No such content exists in that game. Just thought I'd throw that out there. Mrs. Clinton had already been making a stink about the impact that GTA allegedly had on the youth, making a speech at the Kaiser Family Foundation about the silent epidemic of violent video games. She pointed her tenderly witch-like fingers at GTA because of its adult nature and the notoriety it had amassed, trying to suggest that it objectified women. I mean, just because GTA has prostitutes and strippers doesn't mean it's objectifying women. In fact, this may surprise you, but these types of people also exist in the real world. Shocking, right? Strippers and hookers are actual people too. Who would have thought? Jack was energized, ready to work with Miss Clinton on some kind of bipartisan resolution that would prevent children from being harmed by the Hauser brothers. It didn't matter to him that she's a Democrat and he's a Republican. Two opposing factions were joining forces to rally against what they believed was a full attack against the American youth. They couldn't risk more school shootings, and they were going to make sure that it never happened again. You can look at America's history of mass shootings since this point and deduce that they both did a terrible job at their mission. It's almost like, and hear me out here, they're both just swindling, lying assholes. Hillary wrote to the head of the Federal Trade Commission, informing her about the ongoing ESRB investigation, requesting that they look into what was going on with all of this hot coffee talk. She wrote, quote, "Alarmingly, it seems like no one yet knows the source of this content. We should all be deeply disturbed that a game which now permits the simulation of lewd sexual acts in an interactive format with highly realistic graphics has fallen into the hands of young people across the country." Clinton proposed legislation to ban the sale of violent and sexually explicit games to children, with a massive $5,000 penalty to any institution or retailer that breaks this rule. She said, quote, "The disturbing material in Grand Theft Auto and other games is like stealing the innocence of our children, and it's making the difficult job of being a parent even harder. I am announcing these measures today because I believe the ability of our children to access pornographic and outrageously violent material on video games rated for adults is spiraling out of control." Nobody could convince Clinton that not only was the ESRB already urging stores to follow such guidelines and to consider common decency, she just sat there stone-faced while people tried to convince her to approach the situation with a touch more nuance. Instead, she just replied that she was trying to protect the children and left the room. Just a back and forth where nothing really went anywhere. This was like a wet dream come true for Jack. Big names in the government were finally listening to his claims. He was kicking his feet, cooing over the attention and the ego stroking that had finally gone his way. So what if he spent so many years trying to destroy a business that was making adult content for adults? And what does it matter if he's also had a history of attacking anything that conflicted with his staunch Christian conservatism? Children were supposedly at risk, and there were billable hours to finally cash in on, damn it. An independent investigation by the ESRB confirmed that the contents of the disc did contain the assets used in the dreaded hot coffee modification. This meant that one of two things were going to happen. The game would be recalled and taken off the market, or the game would have to receive a new rating, meaning Take-Two and Rockstar would have to release a new version. Jack was fine with either of these, but we all know he'd prefer to keep the game off the market. But then, how else will he stir up controversy? Rockstar was furious about this ruling, because a video game had never received a rating based on the outcome of a modification by a third party. The ESRB went ahead with mandating that Rockstar tell all retailers to stop selling GTA San Andreas, as the game was now rated adults only. The ESRB report reads, quote, "After a thorough investigation, we concluded that sexually explicit material exists in a fully rendered unmodified form on the final discs of all three platform versions of the game, PC, CD-ROM, Xbox, and PS2. However, the material was programmed by Rockstar to be inaccessible to the player, and they have stated that was never intended to be made accessible. The material can be accessed by downloading a software patch created by an independent third party without Rockstar's permission, which is now freely available on the internet and through console accessories. Considering the existence of undisclosed and highly pertinent content on the final discs, compounded by the broad distribution of the third-party modification, the credibility and utility of the initial ESRB rating has been seriously undermined. I understand that it's not okay for the materials to be on the disc, and yes, the assets should have been removed. In fact, you can safely remove the models and textures for the characters and the game will function fine. It would just crash whenever the models were called, which was fine considering, they never needed to spawn in the first place. But again, this was all content that was entirely inaccessible to begin with. You could never play the minigame without using third-party tools. It's an active decision on the user's end to install said patches, launch the game, go on a virtual date, and do so successfully. Then you can play the minigame. It's too many steps to be done accidentally or easily. Not to mention, hot coffee was only accessible on PC, and getting it to work on consoles would be considerably more work. This was arguably the biggest win of Jack's career. He managed to work with major figures in the government to bring legislation against a boogeyman that had long preyed on impressionable children. All of those years of putting his foot in his mouth and making a fool of himself were finally paying off. I'm sure his son was really popular among his peers for getting the hottest video game into boiling hot water. Or, coffee, I guess. Legislation was happening all over the world in reaction to the hot coffee controversy. AB 1779 was a bill enacted in California that banned the sale of violent video games to anyone under 18, with a $1,000 fine for each infraction. Australia made it illegal to sell or even advertise San Andreas after its rating in America had been revoked. The Federal Trade Commission was also breathing down the neck of Rockstar and Take-Two, after a 355-21 vote in the House was passed to request the FTC to investigate Rockstar's business, suggesting that they potentially committed fraud by not informing the ESRB about the locked-away assets. Hillary Clinton and Joseph Lieberman put out the Family Entertainment Protection Act, which banned the sale of M-rated games to children and allowed government audits of the ESRB and individual retailers' enforcement policies. Almost everything Jack Thompson had hoped for was finally coming true. The titan of entertainment that had been a thorn in his side for years, outside of making up substantial amounts of money and bolstering his career, was finally crashing down. His nemesis had accidentally poured gasoline on the already burning inferno that was America's culture war. Jack even held and participated in protests against Rockstar over the coming months, and rallied as many clueless people together as he could in his holy war. He was fighting for a higher power, or at least that's what he convinced himself of, but yet his targets would never face him. He saw this as cowardice, but let's be realistic for a moment. Why would anybody want to talk to Jack Thompson, especially someone from Rockstar? He was not going to provide anything beneficial for them in their current predicament, and they likely had nothing that he'd want either. At a certain point, his motivation had to be his ego, because most people were still unconvinced that mature games were the epitome of all evil.
And for one man in Florida, it was another sign that American culture is going straight to hell.
Here you're literally stomping somebody into the pavement, and you can stomp them until there's a pool of blood in the street of the person you just killed.
Request AC-130 gunship support. In a world of make-believe battles, Jack Thompson considers himself a real-life warrior. The conservative Christian attorney says he is on a mission to protect children from evil.
You're kicking, punching, ultimately shooting, cutting the heads off of people with machetes of people you don't even know and don't have a motive to be violent against.
Though many games like this are rated mature, it is perfectly legal to sell them to kids. In fact, Thompson once videotaped his 10-year-old son buying them in an effort to sting a major retailer. His activism also includes relentless lawsuits, lobbying, and protests. And when it comes to the company behind some of the most mature titles, he is hardly coy.
I'm out to shut down Rockstar because they're run by a bunch of sociopaths, and they're a one-company crime wave.
This pits his one-man practice against some of the most powerful law firms in corporate entertainment.
At this point, Jack had spent a staggering amount of time trying to prosecute people for expressing themselves in a way that wasn't appropriate for the entire family. In life, you'll always meet people that dislike you for any number of reasons, and some decisions you make may only serve to negatively impact your future interactions with people. Jack, as we know, is not a stranger to receiving hate mail. He had received plenty of it years ago when he was going after Neil Rogers, but this time he was on the receiving end of a sea of angry letters and emails. Gamers were not happy with him trying to impede on their pastime. Jack's entire business model was built upon making inflammatory statements about other people and their work. He'd mix in a little bit of truth or basic observations into his rhetoric, and then pollute it with reactionary appeals to emotion or trying to apply some religious fanaticism to it. However, he couldn't handle any level of heat coming back against him if it didn't involve him standing in a courtroom and looking smug. Some of the hate mail he had received read as the following, quote, "I think video games are freaking awesome, and they are my entire life, and for you to insult them is like telling me my life is totally worthless. For this, sir, I am going to fucking kill you." Everyone thinks you're insane, hence the name Wacko Jacko, which makes you the equivalent of a molester. Therefore, you are gay. I hate you, and the world would be a better place if you were brutally murdered. This is not spam. This is my right as a citizen to send you thousands upon thousands of emails saying the same thing until you die painfully from gunshot wounds. These were all nasty messages, and yes, nobody should ever be made to feel scared for having an opinion, even if it's an especially stupid one. But, of course, this is merely the nature of the internet. It's an intricate extension of the human brain and tongue, a place where we say just about anything, and we tend to use it to share our most passionate emotions. And yeah, people are going to say some hateful shit because they're fired up, but he was asking for it. Jack would later publicly cry about this. I mean, how could anybody ever wish harm upon him when he had spent literally decades trying to make people hate him? Why was he overjoyed about unpopularity before, but now it was suddenly too much? Jack tried to reach out to the gaming press, such as GameSpot, about the situation that he found himself in. Unsurprisingly, gaming journalists didn't view him in a favorable light and largely ignored the claims that he made. But when this was unsuccessful, he reached out to the governmental powers that could help him wipe away his tears. Clinton and Lieberman, again. In his letter to the senators, he wrote, quote, "The use of death threats and retaliation for my participation in the public square serves to prove, rather convincingly, that the violent video games are having an attitudinal effect that psychologists such as Dr. David Walsh and others who have testified before Congress say they have." Because of this, one 16-year-old boy from Texas was charged with harassing Thompson, who gloated about the supposed victory, saying, quote, "Shoot the messenger is the video game industry strategy. This time, because of the arrest in Texas, it didn't work. It backfired." His pissy demeanor tells me that this stopped being about protecting the innocence of children or pleasing his Sky Daddy. He wanted to stick it to the entire games industry and fans that weren't pleased with his haphazardly thrown together arguments. He was a miserable man who couldn't accept any level of criticism without screaming and trying to wipe out his competition. Websites were popping up around the web, like stopjackthompson.com, dedicated to shitting all over him whenever they could. Jack took to arguing with gamers in online forums, trying to masquerade himself as a stunning rhetorician while gamers across the board just dismissed him as a total nutcase. He'd try and try and try, yet the players would never accept any of his reasoning. This brought his piss to a boil, but what could he do about this? It's not like he could hold everyone accountable for disagreeing with him. However, he could just double or triple down on his campaigning. That'll do it. Jack, being the brilliant mind that he is, made his home address, email, and phone number readily available for anyone to come and try to challenge him on his beliefs. Then he was suddenly shocked when people took the bait and smacked him around like the sissy he is. He once said, quote, "The amount of energy put into trying to destroy me tells me that they know this is about something worthwhile. Kiss the game industry goodbye." Simply put, Jack was too stupid to not feed the trolls. This should dispel any possible reservations you might have had about his intellectual capability. Meanwhile, Jack was trying to kick up any tizzy that he could about Rockstar's next big video game, Bully. It's almost like this game was designed specifically to upset people like him. And while the game does stand on its own as a solid open-world sandbox experience with a compelling story, it focused on a demographic that Jack Thompson just so desperately wanted to protect: children. Rockstar was applying the GTA formula to a boarding school setting, taking away the darker aspects and supplementing them with gratuitous gags and cartoon violence. At its very worst, it was a campy and lighthearted title. News sources were quick to allow Thompson on their programs to spew his usual crap about how Rockstar was basically the devil and that the world would split in two and hell would leak out into our lovely neighborhoods if the game comes out. It was a tired song and dance, but it got numbers. Still didn't stop the game from being released and being a hit among fans, however. On October 10, 2005, Jack set up a challenge for the entire games industry, a modest video game proposal. He was hoping that some talented game developers would bring this idea to life. In this game, you were supposed to play as a disgruntled parent of a now dead child. This kid had died at the hands of the evil video games, and it was your mission to try to enact revenge on your enemies, which was supposed to feature the death of Paul Eibler, the then CEO of Take-Two Interactive, as a sort of eye for an eye thing in their culture war. Thompson stated that, if this game were to be created and distributed, he'd donate $10,000 to Eibler's favorite charity. Many independent developers and avid GTA modders took him up on his challenge, but Jack made sure to step back and clarify that of course this was a satirical proposal. According to a Joystick article on the matter, quote, "A team of GTA modders called the Fighting Hellfish has created a San Andreas mod for the PC that Jack Thompson could have designed. If he included himself as the vengeful father he proposed earlier, on a murderous rampage through the video game industry. And there you have the story of JT and his bandman alter ego and defamation of character, a Jack Thompson murder simulator. But that's not all. Not only is he unsatisfied with the mod, he claims earlier his proposal was intended to be satire, to quote, highlight the patent hypocrisy and recklessness exhibited by the video game industry's willingness to target cops, women, homosexuals, and other groups with some of their violent games. So the $10,000 offer to charity was satire too? On October 17, 2005, Jerry Holkins and Mike Rahulik, the co-creators of Penny Arcade, posted a response to Jack Thompson's antics. Quote, "You know what, Jack? We're going to be the men you're not. You said that your insulting, illusory $10,000 would go to the charity of Paul Eibler's choice. We've got a good guess that he'd direct your non-existent largesse towards the Entertainment Software Association Foundation, a body that has raised over $6.7 million over the last 8 years. We've just made the donation you never would, and never meant to. $10,000 worth, and we made it in your name." Jack, being a bigger wuss than anybody could have imagined, trying to get in litigation over this. According to a Game Politics article that was covering the matter, Jack said, quote, "A Seattle business by the name of Penny Arcade employs certain personnel who have decided to commence and orchestrate criminal harassment of me by various means. This company has done this because I dared to go on CBS's 60 Minutes in March and again in July to explain the wrongful death lawsuit I have brought on behalf of 2 police officers and a police dispatcher in Fayette, Alabama, who were shot in the head and killed by Devin Moore, who obsessively trained on Grand Theft Auto Vice City to kill them. As you may know, this incredibly violent Rockstar Games product is actually a, quote, cop-killing murder simulator. There are a bunch of computer geeks out there that think the video game industry has a constitutional right to paint a bullseye on your back and on your officers' backs. That is what this criminal harassment of me by Penny Arcade is all about. They're even selling an I Hate Jack Thompson t-shirt, but that is just the tip of the iceberg. These idiots have been so careless as to post on their Penny Arcade website what they are doing regarding the harassment of me. I look forward to working with your fine police department to shut this little extortion factory down and/or arrest some of its employees. Turns out that whole modest proposal thing was a giant crock of shit. People were furious that he was baiting and switching his audience with claims that he'd give money to a worthwhile charity if his demands were met. People completed the task that he had sent out, but instead of being a man by honoring his word, he instead moved the goalpost to prevent anybody from making him pay up. And let's be real here. So what if other people made the donation in his name? At least something good was finally attached to his moniker. Once again, things just sorted themselves out for him, and he didn't have to be responsible. Thompson's own brand of hate had finally turned around and started to bite him on the ass. Who could have predicted that he put himself in this box? Rockstar was set to release another entry for the GTA franchise, a PSP-exclusive spin-off set in GTA 3's Liberty City, known as Liberty City Stories. Going to the game's promotional website allowed viewers to view fictional emails from a character called JT, who represented a group called the Citizens United Negating Technology for Life and People's Safety, abbreviated to the ever-flattering CUNFLAPS. The email read, quote, "The internet is unambiguously evil. The only things worse than the internet are computer games and liberals. Only last week, I was using the internet to look up some information for my 15-year-old niece, who is a keen water skier and statewide sailor. Trust me when I say this, searching under the subject matter teenage girls water sports is not for the faint-hearted." This hurt Jack's feelings. Now his enemies were poking fun at him too? Only he could say toxic things about other people. He went onto the internet to bitch and moan how Rockstar gave him a taste of his own medicine, saying, quote, "Rockstar and Take-Two are furthering the notion that its most abiding and most effective critic, Jack Thompson, is himself a sexual pervert. I can assure the world that the only thing to which he is addicted is eating entertainment industry scufflaws for breakfast, and golf." Oh, the poor little stupid fuck. He'd need to save his energy for an upcoming court date against Rockstar's attorneys in the Devin Moore case. Things were really starting to heat up. On November 3, 2005, Thompson sat in the same courtroom as Rockstar's attorneys. Jack was spitting out his usual spiel about how Rockstar was intentionally trying to rewire the brains of people that play their games, and how the objective of each GTA title is to maim others through increasingly more grotesque means, generally just lying through his teeth like he had been known to do. After several of his points were shot down because they were grossly incompetent, Thompson started to throw a fit. He accused Rockstar of labeling him as bisexual and a pedophile because of their parodic comments on the Liberty City Stories website. The judge was not entertained by this, as a stack of press releases and forum posts and emails that Jack had posted were now being brought up in the courtroom. The judge was furious that, after the criminal trial of Devin Moore, Jack went off the rails and showed his ass in ways that the courts didn't expect. After a few days, the judge removed Jack from the case because everybody realized that he was astoundingly full of shit. The judge said, quote, "Most of these communications contained long and angry speeches by Mr. Thompson that can only be described by the court as bizarre and childish. If Mr. Thompson continues to inundate the court with prohibited and irrelevant communications, this court shall use its contempt power for relief." A truly devastating defeat after years of trying to take down Rockstar and Take-Two. When Jack returned home, he discovered a massive pile of mail waiting at his door. But there was also a package with a note for him, stating, quote, "Enclosed, please find the sample you requested." But Jack didn't order any samples of anything. Upon opening the box, he discovered a tiny bottle of Astroglide Silken Secret, a vaginal moisturizer to help relieve the discomfort associated with vaginal dryness. His burned coochie was certainly going to need that, so whoever sent it was actually being quite considerate. He immediately wrote to the judge that just embarrassed him, claiming that Rockstar and their fans were still harassing him at his residence. He wrote, quote, "Is there any connection between Rockstar stating to its video gamer minions that I had an organization whose name refers to vaginal folds and the sending of me and my wife vaginal moisturizer? A good question and a fair question, don't you think, Judge?" Something I forgot to mention earlier, but I'll go ahead and throw in now, is that Jack also used his same arguments in disputes with Electronic Arts and Maxis, the studio behind the massive life simulation franchise The Sims. The game, being a life simulator after all, does feature sexual intercourse, but it's heavily censored with mosaic filters and lighthearted cartoony visuals and language. Not to mention it's all hidden with bedsheets. The game is rated for teens, so it had to take some liberties with the more adult matters to make them suitable for younger audiences. The game, much like GTA, was extremely popular because of how easily it could be modded. The Sims 2 featured a tool, called Body Shop, that allowed players to modify existing clothing items and create new ones for their characters to try on and enjoy. With a bit of trickery, you could use this to get the characters naked without the mosaic filter in place. You could also use scripts or commands to entirely disable the mosaic filter. The characters are a lot like play dolls. Jack learned of this and actually tried to report that the game did have those types of appendages and bits attached to the virtual characters, and even tried to suggest that the game was, quote, "delighting pedophiles with its content." EA's Jeff Brown rejected this, bringing up how the characters look a lot like Ken and Barbie dolls when their clothing was removed. Thompson hammered down his point that this doesn't matter, because modders could change the way the game worked in order to see the things that were censored. You know, things that weren't even there. Turns out GTA modder Ill Spirit took the badge of honor of being the person to inform Jack about the supposed nudity hidden within The Sims 2, and they allege that they warned Thompson that there was no genitals to be seen. So, if this is true, I have to ask, what the fuck was the point of this? Was it to make Jack look stupid? He did that well enough on his own. Ill Spirit just muddied the water and brought unnecessary stress to the people working on creating The Sims. Once Jack realized that he had been misinformed about this, he still tried to suggest that EA was at fault. Don't you just love when people are proven wrong and they still find a way to stick to their guns? He never would have been proven wrong if he just did his own due diligence and checked the game's contents. It's not that hard. Rockstar and their games didn't appear to be going anywhere, even if hot coffee turned out to be a catastrophic blow for them for a brief period. Jack was getting older, and so was his son, who was growing increasingly uncomfortable with telling people that his father was the boogeyman of the gaming industry. Gamers, however, were still as active as ever and looking for new ways to ram Jack's own pecker in his ass, employing his own tongue-in-cheek methods to get under his skin that if he wasn't such a prude, he'd likely admire the effort behind. Gamers had created a campaign called Flowers for Jack, where people were raising money to send bouquets of flowers to Mr. Thompson's residence, hopefully to help him and this disgruntled party set aside their differences and find a stable middle ground. Who am I kidding? These guys just wanted to give him a little ribbing. He later forwarded the bouquet of flowers to the office of Take-Two Interactive, including a note that read, quote, "In the memory of all the people who now lie in the ground because of your reckless design, marketing, and the sale of mature-rated murder simulators to children." Despite this, Jack was still pecking away at his keyboard, trying to write up any new proposal that he could that had slowed down the Grand Theft money printer just enough to make his name known, but not enough to hinder his ability to make money. He still practiced law and took other cases to keep the bills paid, but his Rockstar war was what put his name on the map and somehow got him clients. I can't imagine how anybody saw his shoddy arguments and thought, you know what, I should go ahead and pay that guy in advance to handle my legal defense, but I suppose stupid is as stupid does.
You helped write the Louisiana legislation that would ban these sales. Why do you think it's necessary to have a ban?
It's not a ban.
A ban to minors, I should say.
Yeah, well, because 40-some states have laws that prohibit the distribution of sexual material harmful to minors. We have a movie rating system in that regard, and the industry itself labels these games as adult or mature. And therefore, we're simply saying to the industry, if you're going to label these things and admit that they're harmful to minors, stop selling them to them. The Federal Trade Commission found last month that roughly 42% of the time, any kid of any age can walk into any retailer and buy any game like Grand Theft Auto San Andreas despite the game rating. So we're simply saying stop selling these adult games to kids, and apparently the industry is afraid that the American Psychological Association, the largest collection of psychologists in the world, issued a report in August of 2005 saying that there's a direct causal link between the play of violent video games by adolescents and minors and violence that we're seeing in the real world. So, Professor, how in the world could you say such a thing that there's no evidence? There are 30-some studies in the last several years participated in by the American Medical Association and others that draw a direct link between violent entertainment that teens play and real increased aggression and violence. So it's simply a misstatement. I assume you misspoke.
No, I didn't misspoke. You unfortunately are ignorant of statistics and don't really understand those studies.
The American Psychological Association is ignorant?
You're apparently too rude to even listen to the answer to your question. Good. Those studies show correlations between watching video games and violence. They do not show causation.
Once again, this was already supposed to be the standard. He ultimately wasn't succeeding in doing anything other than further reiterating the guidelines that retailers were already supposed to follow. He wasn't doing anything new or groundbreaking, but rather he was like a glorified hall monitor, a tattletale that wanted to do whatever the right thing was, but used threats of punishment if you failed to adhere to the standards that he so rigidly followed. While it's true that games were still technically legal to sell to children even with a mature rating prior to this legislation, the ESRB urged retailers to not sell the product to children without a parent's consent. This loophole worked wonderfully even after the federal government said that the rules had to be followed more strictly. Jack was also fighting tooth and nail to get Bully indefinitely postponed or outright banned. This was to prevent children from training to abuse their peers in the game, at least in Miami-Dade County. He used pre-release screenshots of fights happening in the game without understanding what was going on in that scene. It never mattered to Thompson that Rockstar featured stories that gave context and a narrative purpose to the things that the players could do in their games, within reason anyway. Players could always choose to cause havoc in the open world, but the games would actively punish the player if they happened to break the rules.
Well, in 1999, I represented 6 parents whose 3 children were shot and killed in Paducah, Kentucky. Michael Carneal trained on the game Doomed to Do It. A week before Columbine, I predicted Columbine on the Today Show. And every bullying expert who's aware of this game has predicted that this game will lead to real-world violence in schools. You know, your poll of your viewers, who are mostly gamers, is interesting.
Of course,
but
now,
it flies in the face of all the science and all the medicine.
True. Now, Adam, that study that Jack is referring to said there was a link.
Yeah,
there are other studies that came out that said it also shows that violent people tend to like violent images, which was also represented in that same study. Do you believe that bully is going to be responsible for an increase in any violent crimes?
No, it's on the face of it kind of preposterous. And you know what? It's actually really disturbing and intellectually dishonest and somewhat pernicious to try to say that with all the other ills in the world, where you have kids that are getting absolutely poor education in public schools, where they're not getting good medical care given to our healthcare system, and with the fact that people can't seem to get a decent job. Though, what is causing trouble among America's youth in schools? Oh, it has to be a video game. Anyone of thought should find that insulting at the face of it.
So the solution to bad grades is for kids to spend more time playing video games?
Bad
grades?
Your answer? We are talking about violence.
When people were still unmoved by his claims that children were once again in danger, Jack tried to pull out the race card, subtly trying to suggest that Rockstar was racist because you could take black kids in that game and dunk their head into a toilet. Never mind that you could do this to any character in the game, and I'm pretty sure you could even do it to the prefects in the school, but my memory could be lying to me. Either way, he was just trying to pull anything that he could to get his way. I would argue that lying never really helped his stance.
Have you spent any time with Bully? Have you actually seen the game being played at all?
No, really nobody has, except people that Rockstar and Take-Two want to see it. But what I provided on the internet were exclusive screenshots, not the 3 that Rockstar had up for months, showing a dunking of a black student's head in a dirty toilet, body slamming, punching, the descriptions of the game itself, in which you use slingshots to shoot people and bludgeon teachers and students with cricket bats. I mean, this is
actually, you know what? Actually, Rockstar's actually come out and said that the hurting of teachers is not something that happens in the game, and then much of the stuff that you're describing, well, I at one point did believe that might be the subject matter of the game, has been repeatedly denied by Rockstar. I don't understand why you can't even at least give them the benefit of the doubt until the game comes out.
Well, let me tell you a couple reasons why we shouldn't give Take-Two the benefit of the doubt. One is, this is the company that said they didn't put the hot coffee sex mod in Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, number 1. Number 2 is, there have been earlier descriptions of the game in which you bludgeon teachers, and they didn't disavow them. Now, there's been a year since I sued retailers, also got the 4th largest school district in the country to pass a resolution condemning the game and its release. And it may, in fact, be that Take-Two has modified the game because of that pressure. There's a real simple solution here.
Because of how much noise Jack was making, the judge overseeing the case requested Take-Two provide footage of Bully so they could determine whether or not the game violated any laws. Upon seeing that the game was just a satirical interpretation of boarding school life, using tropes from existing stories to help establish something unique and new, the case was dropped and the Miami-Dade County Circuit ruled against the banning of selling violent video games to minors. Besides, the game was meant for teenagers, not adults. The content of the game was made specifically for that age range, and it showed. But Jack wasn't done here, as footage leaked online of the entire kissing mechanic in the game. The game's character, Jimmy Hopkins, could give certain girls around his school chocolates or flowers in exchange for a smooch. Depending on the player's progress, this kiss could restore their health bar, and even provide additional health points beyond the default limit. This game also featured a single kissable boy from each in-game click. Jack saw this footage and couldn't stand for any level of homosexuality to be featured in gaming, especially Bully. God damn it, think of the children again! What is Rockstar doing? Thompson wrote to the judge saying, "You did not see the game. You don't even know what it is you saw. You have consigned innumerable children to skull fractures, eye injuries from slingshots, and beatings with baseball bats." Yeah, because kids are doing that all the time. Unfortunately for Jack, he had a tendency to stuff his head in his own ass whenever he was challenged on his ideas. When being interviewed as part of a G4 TV panel, Jack demanded that Rockstar provide him with a pre-release copy of Bully so he could play it and determine whether or not the game was going to be despicably evil.
That is, show me the game. Give me the game and I'll play it, and I'll let them know whether or not I or anybody else has a problem with it. But what they want to do is...
That's what we're waiting to do, Jack. So why don't we just hold off until the game comes out?
Because it's going to then be out. They want to keep it under wraps until it's released, and then the horse is out of the barn. But you're speaking of it as if some type of virus that will suddenly infect all of us who have lay hands on, and suddenly we'll just have rampant violence. I think even you would have to acknowledge that that's a rather insane thing to try to claim. Claim what?
Once again, Jack saw himself as the patron saint of the innocence of children. Only he could verify the moral integrity of a product, because other people are too stupid to know how to raise their kids. Take-Two had grown tired of the games that Jack was playing because, let's be honest, at this point, it was becoming repetitious harassment of a corporation, if that's even possible. If Jack was serious about this stuff, he'd have better arguments and would likely have sources to back up his claims. The court of public opinion and independent research indicated that not only was Jack incorrect about the things he was saying, but he was also a visibly unhappy person. Take-Two worked tirelessly to try to get Thompson declared in contempt of court for his years of nonsensical litigation and non-stop harassment of the company's employees. This angered Jack, who wrote back, quote, "You want to try to throw me in jail? You have no idea what you are unleashing in doing this. You're at the brink." On October 25th at about 4 p.m. 2006, Jack sat uncomfortably in the Miami courtroom for his contempt hearing. While he may have thought that God and Jesus were on his side, it appeared that the American legal system was not. He got burned by the judge, who stripped him down and hosed him metaphorically for everyone to witness. The judge announced that he was going to be filing a complaint to the bar about Jack Thompson, because he too had noticed his pattern of unhealthy legal practice. Jack tried his best to plead to the judge, justifying his actions because he has a child who is currently in school. In fact, he even swore to bring down Rockstar yet again, threatening to sue in order to postpone or block the release of the sequel of Manhunt, which was even more gruesome and terrifying than the first entry in the next GTA title. After this, Take-Two personally reached out to Jack, requesting that he come meet some of the people from their board in hopes of finally solving this ongoing dispute. Jack went to New York and met Strauss Zelnick, the new and current CEO of Take-Two Interactive. Jack claimed that he said something along the following, quote, "Look, I'm here to tell you to stop selling your Grand Theft Autos and other mature-related games to kids. And if you do that and tell your retailers to stop, I will call a press conference and tell them Take-Two is the most responsible bunch of people I ever met." Which, to me, sounds like a crock of shit. If that's all it takes to make them the most responsible people ever, then his standards are incredibly low. Because remember, in his eyes, this still would not undo the deaths that they caused. Really, he's just a glorified snake oil salesman. He tried to claim that Take-Two personally told him that they were in a war with him, and they would not stop until he was destroyed. In the following months, in March of 2007, Take-Two petitioned the United States District Court of the Southern District of Florida to try to solve the ongoing problem with Jack. They wrote, quote, "Thompson has a history of making multiple threats of legal action, whether substantiated or not, both against Take-Two as well as the retailers who purchased the video games and offered them for sale to the public." Turns out Jack wasn't as good at the legal game as a bunch of highly paid attorneys for a massive media corporation, especially when they, unlike him, actually know how to do their job efficiently. However, a settlement was reached on April 17, 2007, where Thompson agreed to not threaten or sue or even contact Take-Two through their attorneys. They had effectively silenced him, at least for the time being, and all it took was turning his own games against him. How could he not have seen this coming? All these years trying to raise the heat, and he never noticed that he earned himself a 6-star wanted level. But, surprisingly, this wasn't exactly the end of Jack's mission. A day prior to the settlement, the Virginia Tech shooting happened on April 16, 2007. Thompson used this tragedy to, as you likely can guess, talk about the same points he'd been talking about for years. In the journalism field, if it bleeds, it leads. This also meant that Jack wasn't too far behind.
Well, one of the things authorities are going to look at is not only his computer, whoever this was, but also what else he was immersed in. What the FBI and Secret Service found after Columbine in looking at all the school shootings up to then was the common denominator being the immersion of the perpetrators in incredibly violent entertainment, most notably violent video games. And the reason why that's significant forensically is that, for example, in Red Lake, Minnesota, Jeffrey Weiss, who killed 10 near Bemidji, Native American, the FBI found that he had basically rehearsed for the massacre by playing Grand Theft Auto Vice City
in order to get his heart rate down and be able to kill, which would otherwise be an unnerving event even for the perpetrator.
Jack was always nearby when something bad happened. I guess just letting people investigate what happened and eventually grieve so they can come to terms with the events just made too much sense. He had to immediately shout out that gaming was to be blamed. Zero nuance, no level-headed or thought-provoking arguments, not even a second to let the bodies cool down. There's something about the way his whole shtick was put together that makes me feel sick to my stomach.
Typically, the school shooters train literally on video games to do this. Dawson College last year, Montreal, the killer trained on a game called Super Columbine Massacre. Also Postal 2, both of which are murder simulation games in which the school shooters can rehearse and plan for and make themselves more efficient in these kind of murderous rampages. Jeffrey Weiss of Red Lake, Minnesota, a year and a half ago. He trained on Grand Theft Auto Vice City. I spoke with the FBI agent in charge there, and he said he could tell by the surveillance videos that he had basically done this before. He could tell his heart rate was below 60 beats per minute. He trained on a mass murder game, as I said, Grand Theft Auto. I represented the parents in Paducah, Kentucky. Michael Carneal, aged 14, trained on the game Doom. We went on NBC a week before Columbine. Matt Lauer asked me, what do you fear based upon what you learned in Paducah? And I said, we fear that there are going to be more of these by kids trained on the same game. Klebold and Harris trained on the game Doom.
When Grand Theft Auto 4 was announced, Jack started to foam at the mouth. The GTA series was still a massive franchise despite how much work he had put into trying to bust the crooks behind the entertainment. He openly called it, quote, the greatest assault upon children in this country since polio, after witnessing just how much of a technological leap the game provided compared to the previous entries. The games are only getting more realistic, and in his eyes, this meant that more children would be coerced into living out lives of chaotic criminality. Since he couldn't directly contact Take-Two, he made an open letter to Strauss Zelnick's mother, stating, quote, your son, this very moment, is doing everything he possibly can to sell as many copies of GTA 4 to teen boys in the United States, a country in which your son claims you raised him to be a Boy Scout. More like Hitler Youth, I would say. What a disgusting thing to send to someone's mother, implying that she somehow groomed her son into becoming a Nazi because he, what was that again? Oh right, helped create games that were made by adults for adults. I'm sure you're tired of me beating you over the head with the same point, but it's important to remember that detail because Jack was always pushing the same crap over and over ad nauseum. But I don't know, I've got this underlying feeling that maybe Jack wasn't thinking clearly and just placed a target on his back yet again. Rockstar did incorporate a parody of Jack in GTA 4 with the character Tom Goldberg. Goldberg is a vexatious and cutthroat lawyer who parades himself as a beacon of hope in the crime-ridden metropolis that is Liberty City, but his entire legal history is built upon destroying people for the most minor of offenses. Every case of his lacks integrity and credibility, similar to his inspiration, and rest assured, the player does get to kill them in a pretty fun mission.
Standing up. Whoa, hold on a second there, friend. We're lawyers, we don't need guns. Strong move, though, I gotta say, I like that style. I'm all about the Second Amendment. Guns don't kill people, video games do.
This little loophole that he tried to abuse turned out to be the exact thing that was needed to destroy his professional career in law. On September 25, 2008, the Florida bar weighed their options in regards to how Jack had betrayed himself and his business for the last few years, on top of his lengthy history of trying to bully people into submission. They voted to permanently disbar Jack because of his, quote, extensive misconduct of the respondent and his lack of remorse. I guess all of those lawsuits that he had brought forth were widely seen as a bunch of nonsense, marking him as abusive and vexatious. This was it, the end of Jack Thompson's baseless crusade against an industry that was only trying to create enjoyable products for a profit. His years of relying on the spilled blood of people that he alleged were killed by people that were trained by Scottish game designers had finally come to a close. He might have thought he was a hotshot, a force to be reckoned with, but it turns out his business died without some kind of extravagant or attention-grabbing bang, but rather with a somber little whimper. In the years that followed his disbarment, Jack enrolled in the Reformed Theological Seminary as part of the clergy. When asked about this change in his life, Thompson replied, quote, 31 years fighting with the bar and the entertainment industry is a pretty good run. I'm surprised I lasted that long. He did bitch and moan about Grand Theft Auto 5 around the time of its release, but that's all he could really do. He just didn't have that kind of pool anymore. It's interesting that one of the longest-running plot lines that followed Grand Theft Auto were not the tales of the troubled characters within the confines of the game's world, but rather a years-long battle between an overly religious man with a desire to silence anybody who disagrees with him and a crew of avid designers and programmers who meticulously create unique experiences for gamers to enjoy around the world. There are many games that Jack tried to pick apart, like Counter-Strike, Halo, and so many others that I couldn't get to in this video, otherwise we'd be here for at least another hour. But his arguments were always the same thing: virtual violence bad. All in all, I think Jack Thompson is a phony who tried to abuse the system to take down his critics and his direct opposition. His legal practice was built upon harassing people that he deemed his enemy, and the fact that he was able to get by for so long without anything much happening in retaliation to him is quite remarkable. But, to give credit where credit's due, I do think on some level he does genuinely believe that he was on the side of God during this skirmish. I also appreciate that on some level he did lean into the joke. He did do interviews with people that were lighthearted and allowed himself to be seen in a different light, like when he played out a few skits on the Jace Hall show when discussing his ongoing battles with the gaming industry. Yeah, his opinions sucked, but he was willing to goof around with people. He wasn't always hostile, and there's probably a good chance that his bravado was just part of his business, like a branding of sorts.
I don't want to take away their options. I just want to make sure they have no options. I have no problem with violence, but if there's a video game involved, that's a problem.
I understand. I'm going to be honest.
Why start now? Go ahead.
I really think that the retailers are doing a much better job than you indicate in terms of keeping the young people from buying violent.
Excuse me, how old are you?
25.
Give me that. What you need is to read. Give me this, go home and read.
Pet Cats 2. It's a game about kittens, Jack.
It's obviously a game about making kittens. Look at what they're doing here. Look at this. This is not for children.
Nintendo dogs, little furry dog animals. What do you think?
If this game had never been made, Michael Vick would be a free man. Wow. Pretty cool.
While his rhetoric left a lot to be desired, he pushed and pushed until he physically couldn't do it anymore. Even if he was arguably his own worst enemy, he believed that he was pushing a moral message to the American people, and maybe he did impact some people's lives in a positive way. It's just a shame that he was too full of himself to notice that he was in way over his head. These days, we're seeing more and more people try to limit what creative types can do with the entertainment products they put out. There's no denying that the gaming industry is in a weird rut as far as quality content and monetization go, but there's still so many talented people out there making careers that are bringing joy to other folks. Rockstar is still going strong, raking in incalculable amounts of money with GTA Online, and the hype for the upcoming Grand Theft Auto 6 is really high up there. I don't think there's a single game as anticipated as GTA 6, and only time will tell how that game turns out. With any luck, it'll be everything that Jack Thompson hated and more. I just can't wait to tear Leonida apart. It's gonna be a fun ride. But with that being said, that's gonna be it for today's video. If you like what I do, leave a comment, rate, and subscribe. This was a topic that I wanted to cover for a very long time, and I hope you guys will stick around for the long haul. There's so much more to come. If you want to support me in a more personal way, you can check out the Patreon link and the Teespring link in the description. I've also got a Newgrounds account if art stuff is your thing. And if you like making broad and crude observations about people on the internet, be sure to check out my weekly Saturday streams. I've got more content coming down the pipeline. But until then, I'll see you degenerates next time.